I was pleased to welcome Elliot Ackerman to campus this May to deliver the commencement speech to the class of 2026. Mr. Ackerman is a former U.S. Marine who served 5 tours in Iraq and Afghanistan. He's also the author of numerous works of fiction and nonfiction. Prior to speaking to this year's graduating class, I had the opportunity to sit down with Elliot in my office. Elliot, welcome.
Thanks for having me.
It's so great to talk with you.
Yeah.
You're going to be speaking tomorrow.
Yes.
So I'm wondering if you could give us a sneak preview of what you're going to be talking about. It's a bit disingenuous because I've read your remarks, but for the audience.
I think I wanted to talk to the students about what it means to be from an organization, how you carry it with you. Because I can imagine, I had a chance to speak with some of your students that as you're closing out such an important chapter of your life, the inevitable thought pokes into your head. Like, what is this going to mean? And am I really losing this place forever?
Yeah.
So I'll be speaking a little bit about that.
Yeah.
I'm a big movie buff.
Yes.
And one of the lines I love is the last line of the movie Grease.
Oh my gosh. Hold on. Let me think if I can remember that. I can't remember it.
And it's when I think Rizzo says to Johnny, says, "Oh no, is this the end?" And he goes, "No, it's just the beginning."
Yeah.
And I think there's a lot to be, that's fine. I mean, it's that idea, but I think when you're young and you're letting go of something, it can feel really hard because you feel like, oh my God, am I letting go of this forever?
Yeah.
It's like, no, you're starting something new.
Yeah.
So I think I'm going to talk a little bit about, at least from my perspective, what it means to start that new chapter within an institution. So.
Yeah. It's a very hard turn tomorrow afternoon when the kids, they literally walk across the stage and then like that, their experience is kind of over, not over because it keeps going, but it's quite a transition.
Well, I think as adults, like you do this enough that you understand that like, okay, this ends and then the new thing happens and you carry it with you. But when you're a young person, you go through the first one of those. Yeah, it can be a little more disorienting.
Yeah, it can be disorienting. That's a good word for it. In terms of transitions, I wanted to talk about a couple. One, like how did you make the decision to enter ROTC as a college student at Tufts?
Oh,
like how did that happen?
Sure. I was not the obvious pick to head into the military.
Yeah.
So when I was in high school, I was sort of and I'll talk about this in my remarks. I was sort of definitely a middling student. I didn't take it that seriously. I was very creative. But I think around 17, I kind of had this sense of, who am I going to be and what do I want to do? And as I reflected on that, I thought, well, I grew up overseas. So I was born in Los Angeles, but I lived ages 19 to 15 in the UK. And I think living there, being able to travel a lot from there gave me a broader experience of what it meant to just be an American. Yeah. So I had this idea of, I think I'd like to serve my country.
So you went to school in the UK?
I went to the American School in London.
Okay.
And
so did my nephews.
Okay, it's a great school. Go Eagles. And so I had that sense. I had a sense that I wanted a lot of responsibility at a young age. Like I thought that would be amazing to have, just a real sense that I mattered. That whether I was good at my job or bad at my job mattered. So that was sort of an abstract sense. And I think the last was, I was sort of one of these kids who never really stopped playing with his G.I. Joes. Like I had this inherent interest in the military. Like I would, since I was a little boy. So if there was a military book sitting on the table, I'd kind of wind up, flipping through it. So combining all of those, and I'm, 17, 18, I'm thinking about who do I want to be? Where do I want to go? Yeah. I had this idea that I wanted to serve in the military. And that sort of led me, as I did more and more research, it led me into ROTC as an officer commissioning program and then to the Marines.
Yeah. And so you graduated from Tufts in 2003. And then is it accurate that a year later you found yourself leading a Marine rifle platoon during the second Battle of Fallujah? Was it a year after your graduation?
It was a little more, probably about 18 months
18
or so.
months.
I graduated college in May of 2003, and that battle was in November of 2004. Yeah. But that was after years of preparation too.
Yes.
So I'd sort of been on this very long path. Yeah. and I'll talk to them sometimes about,
Yeah.
young Marine officers. Yes, it sounds like, oh, you're a year later, but, so at 17, I make this decision. All right, I want to
Yeah.
go into ROTC.
Yeah.
It's like, well, I got to get into shape. So I was in terrible shape. So I had to
You were.
I'd figure out how to do a pull-up first.
Yeah.
So the distance between me figuring out how to do one pull-up to, leading a rifle platoon in Fallujah was about,
Yeah.
it was about 7 years.
It was about 7 years.
And of work and this being my North Star in my life.
Yeah.
I'm going to, be a Marine.
Yeah. Any
And
doubts along the way? Was
No.
it, you just went right through?
I was sort of like,
Yeah.
as the Marine Corps said, you call it, I was born again hard. Like
Yes.
I woke up, I was like, this
Yeah.
is what I'm going to do, with a lot
Yeah.
of intensity and focus, and loved it. And had
Yeah.
all my best friends, in college were on a similar path. We were all in ROTC together.
Yes.
But one of the things that happened in that journey was 9/11 happened.
Yes.
So I sort of head into the Marine Corps thinking, well, this is it's an abstraction. This will be
Yeah.
interesting. Maybe I'll get to do something real world.
Yes.
And then 9/11 happens and everything became just sort of much more immediate.
Yeah.
For instance, I remember when I was in Quantico, getting ready to head into the Marines. This is sort of, 2002 or 2003 kind
Yeah.
of time frame. Jim Webb,
Yeah.
the senator from Virginia,
Yeah.
youngest Secretary of the Navy ever, an iconic Marine from Vietnam, came and spoke to our group of lieutenants. And he basically said, you guys are the first group of lieutenants to graduate this place knowing that you're going to war since
Yeah.
Vietnam. And that at the time was true. So I only bring that up in just sort of the tenor of my
Yeah.
journey changed like quite a bit
Yes.
in those years.
Yeah. It still must have been a bit of a change to go from a college campus to Iraq. And I'm just wondering, did you feel prepared when you landed there? I mean, did you feel prepared for the responsibility of leading and for having command over 40 plus?
It's interesting. So I did and I didn't.
Yeah.
Will you indulge me in,
Yes.
in an anecdote?
Yeah, please.
Okay. So I was going through ROTC and I found I was good at this.
Yeah.
And I was good at it. I could
Yeah.
do all the tactics. I was good at the tactics. I was good at the
Yeah.
physical fitness.
Yeah.
And for years, I got a lot of identity. I think I'm going to be a good Marine officer.
Yeah.
And I went through Quantico and I did very well at Quantico. And I
Yeah.
got my choice to be an infantry officer. And I was
Yes.
on my way doing really, really well. And I show up at my first rifle platoon. And I'm feeling, very prepared. And then that's where the rubber meets the road. And so when you go through training, you're surrounded by other Marine lieutenants. And so
Yes.
you just think all Marines are lieutenants like me. And then you get to, we call it the fleet Marine Force.
Yeah.
And you're one lieutenant amongst, dozens and dozens of privates, lance corporals, corporals,
Yes.
staff sergeants. And, that's a very kind of rough and tumble type of leadership.
Yeah.
And you learn really quickly kind of, if you're going to sink or swim. And
Yeah.
so I remember when I showed up at my first platoon, one of the interesting dynamics is you are the leader of the platoon when you show up, but you are also the least experienced person in that platoon. And many of the Marines in my platoon had just returned from the invasion of Iraq. So,
Wow.
so think, I'm 24 years old. These are a bunch of kind of young guys. My NCOs are, 21, 22. And I took over from a lieutenant named, still a friend of mine, Doug, named Dave Lee. Big strapping. Everybody loved Lieutenant Lee, and much to my chagrin. And I take over from him, and Lieutenant Lee told me, he said, "Listen, your best Marine is a guy named Adam Bonatai, Sergeant Bonatai, and he had been meritoriously promoted to sergeant from the division. So that means of all the sergeants in the 2nd Marine Division, he had been picked out as a corporal, being the best, and they just meritoriously promoted him, like an early promotion." So I'm like, okay, my best sergeant is Sergeant Bonatai. So in a Marine platoon has 3 squads in it, and so I had 1 sergeant leading 1 squad and 2 corporals leading the other
Yeah.
squads. And so very early on in my tenure there, I decided that, okay, we're going to do some training. We're getting ready to go to Iraq in a few weeks. And we're going to do we're back on base. We're going to do some training around the base today. And I say to my 3 squad leaders, okay, guys, we're going to do this patrol technique tomorrow. Tomorrow morning, come in first thing in the morning. I want you to give me an order that you're going to give to your men, a patrol order, and an overlay, just like a piece of acetate that you would put on a map so I can see where you're going to go. So we end the day that way. I come in the next morning, first squad leader, 1 squad leader comes in, gives me his order and his overlay. The other one does the same thing, and Sergeant Bonatai rolls. And I'm like, Sergeant Bonatai, you got your patrol order and your overlay? He looks at me, he's like, yeah, Lieutenant, I didn't do it. I'm like, what do you mean? What do you mean you didn't do it? He's like, Yeah, I think that's stupid training. Like my squad's not going to do that. And I looked at my platoon sergeant, who was the staff sergeant, my senior enlisted Marine, and I said, "I'm like," and he's kind of gives me a shrug, and I go, "Okay, why don't you meet me in the duty hut in about 30 minutes?" Which was our office was like a big bullpen, so the duty hut was the one sort of private place you could talk to someone. So I very quickly go onto my laptop and I write up a counseling sheet. So just on a like Microsoft Word document. And I put all these leadership traits on it, physical fitness, tactical excellence, all these things. And then I have, leadership. So in every category, I have him marked completely superior because he was a very skilled guy.
Yes.
And in leadership, I have him marked completely deficient. And so I sit down with him and I'm like, "Hey, Sergeant Bonatai, this is a counseling session that we're doing."
So is that like a standard approach to a situation like this, a counseling
It could be,
session?
yeah, it could be a counseling session with the lieutenant. And I'm like,
They taught you this at Quantico.
At Quantico, yes.
When a very experienced,
yes,
challenges you.
But I'm at this point, right? This is, yes. How was it? In my mind, I'm like, I'm a really good officer. Like, why is this guy not seeing how good I am? And why are we disconnecting here? And so I hand him this counseling sheet and I say, "Look, in leadership, I marked you woefully deficient in leadership because leadership, it goes up and it goes down. And you've shown me a great deal of disloyalty, by not doing these orders. If you had a problem with me, you could have shown me loyalty and said, 'Hey, I have a problem with this. Can we do something different?' But you didn't. So you're marked completely deficient in leadership. I want you to sign this counseling sheet and I'm going to put it in your SRB, which is your service record book. It's like your permanent record, basically.
Your file.
Right, your
file. HR file.
Right. And he looked at me and he was mad. And he said, "Leadership?" He said, "What the bleep do you know about leading Marines, sir? I was leading Marines when you were still in college." And I said, "That's all well and good." Signed the form and I put it in his SRB. And 2 weeks later, we went to Iraq together and he was my best squad leader, meaning like this is the guy I'm supposed to rely on. And so one of the things I had to learn was that, in the military in particular, sometimes people look at the military and think, "Oh, it's just a hierarchy. You just tell people what to do and they have to do it." It's not the way at all. Like there are centers of gravity that exist in organizations. And some of those are hierarchical and some of them aren't. Adam Bonatai was a great Marine and he was a real center of gravity in my platoon. But leading that platoon with him out of alignment was like trying to ride a bicycle with a bowling ball underneath your arm. Yeah. You're completely, moving around differently. So the whole time we were in Iraq, for those first probably, month or so, things in the platoon were kind of tough. Like I'd give orders, some guys would hop to it, others would kind of, linger, give me a hard time. You could just feel it. And then we'd been there a little more than a month.
And why was that? Was that because of Adam?
Yeah, Adam thinking I don't know about this Ackerman guy. Does he really have what it takes? I think he's kind of a jerk. I'd say, "Hey, we're going to do X, Y, and Z." Then I would leave, and they'd all, he'd start grumbling to people about Ackerman. And so you can feel it.
Yeah. Yes.
And I've
been there.
Right. Exactly. And I as a 24-year-old, I'm like, what gives? I was top of my class at everything in Quantico. Why is this not working out for me? And so we'd been in Iraq about a month, and we were in Haditha, which is a sort of a very restive town in Al-Anbar province. And we were on a big battalion sweep operations in the middle of the summer. It was 120 degrees, no exaggeration. We've been out all day. And at the end of the day, we get ambushed. An IED goes off. One of my Marines loses his leg below the knee. He's lying in the street, and we're getting shot at from across the river. We're in an ambush. And so a lot's going on very, very quickly. We're really low on water. And I'm trying to figure out, how do we respond? How do I get this Marine medically evacuated? And, Adam runs over, and I think I said something to him to the effect of he's like, "Hey, can we go deploy and do X, Y, and Z?" I'm like, no. Just lay down suppressive fire. I'm like, "Adam, just fight your squad." And then I left him to do it. And that day ended, and from that moment on, everything was in alignment, working perfectly. I'd say, "Hey, we're going to do X, Y, and Z," and it would get done. I'd ask for feedback. Guys would, say what they thought, but it was just smooth. Yeah. And so lo and behold, months later, Adam and I became kind of great friends. And I was like, especially in his wedding. And I'm like, what was the deal? Why were you just suddenly nice to me after Haditha? And he really taught me something. He said, you said to me, "Just fight your squad." In that moment, which was such an intense moment, you trusted me. Mm. And who am I if after you trusted me in that way, I wasn't going to return that degree of trust to you? And I did, and you were a good platoon commander. And that was a huge leadership lesson to me. So, I know it's a long way of answering your question.
No.
Were you prepared? Was I prepared that I knew how to like read a compass, shoot a rifle, deploy a
Yeah.
squad? Yes. Had I had all of those lessons yet?
Yeah.
No, I hadn't. And to me, that was what was so special about my time, in the Marine Corps is learning that. And I've
Yeah.
taken lessons like that throughout my whole life, whether it's, as a Marine officer or as a writer or anything I do,
Yeah.
the power of trusting other people.
Yeah. Amazing. That's an amazing story. I'm wondering if you have any advice for a young person considering going into the military.
I think it's very important that that anyone considering military service or anything,
Yeah.
that you do the type of reflections, why you're doing it.
Yeah.
Like you really understand what your motivation is, because there'll be a lot of moments where, it'll be tough. And
Yeah.
if you're in it for the wrong reasons, you could find yourself confused.
Yes.
People will often ask me the questions like, particularly, I'm a veteran of the Iraq War and the war in Afghanistan. And, those are both sort of politically, fraught. And I think,
Yes.
didn't go immediately according to plan. And so folks have asked me in the past, like, well, do you regret it? Because particularly in Afghanistan, the outcome wasn't great. Or for instance, I fought in Fallujah, the Islamic State rolled through and took Fallujah back at one point. And I never felt a sense of disorientation from those events because I knew the reason I served was not connected to those political outcomes.
Yes.
I wanted to serve, and what really inspired a lot of my service, and this is just me, was I felt like, I'm a guy who has been given lots of great advantages. I came from a really loving family. I got to go to great schools. And I wanted to give something back. And I always in my mind had this abstraction that there was maybe like a group of guys somewhere, and, I could do a good job as their, platoon commander, their team lead, whatever my position was in the military. And there'd maybe be a few moments where I could really make a difference by being there. And when I look back on my military service and these questions like, was it worth it? Why was I there? I can pinpoint probably about a dozen moments in different, mostly firefights, where things were not going well. We were in a tough spot, and I'm on the radio trying to communicate to a higher level commander or what's going to happen next. And I can feel the guys doing their jobs, but also watching and listening to me, because they know that how the outcome of this conversation is, potentially going to determine whether or not they, live, die, or hurt. And so I know that for me, it meant the world to me that I could have been there in those moments, making those arguments.
Yes.
And some of the outcomes of those situations weren't as high as I would have liked them to have gone. So for anyone considering going into the military, I would say, whatever it is, that might not be your thing. That was just my reason for being there, but know why you want to do it.
Yeah.
And if you feel clarity about why you want to do it, then you should do it.
Yeah.
But make sure you know.
Yeah. So you served for 8 years.
Yes.
Why'd you leave?
Because
it sounds like it was very compelling.
It was very meaningful. For me. And it was not ever for me a fait accompli that I would leave. I think probably my 23 or 24-year-old self suspected that I would stay.
Yeah.
I had a great run in the Marine Corps, and really enjoyed at the end of my career. I was working in intelligence and was working with great people in a job that I really enjoyed too. But I sort of arrived at this moment where I made the determination that as much as I enjoyed this, it wasn't the only thing that I wanted to do in my life, that there were other things that I wanted to do. And that the opportunity cost of staying would become too high over the course of my life.
Yeah.
And I subscribed to that. Walt Whitman saw that like we all contain multitudes.
Yes.
And there was sort of another multitude within me that was saying, hey, I want to go do something else. And haven't we done this at this point? And so that led me to the decision to leave ultimately.
Yeah. Was writing was that the thing that was kind of at the back of your mind?
I think in the moment,
yeah,
I was leaving. I knew I felt like I wanted to sort of just live a broader life.
Yes.
So in the moment, I was like, I think I want to do other things. I didn't know exactly what they were. My first job that I left the service to go do was a political job.
Yeah.
But I also knew I had this idea. It's like, I'd like to try to write the type of book that was very meaningful to me when I was entering the service. Because I landed on this idea that I think, every generation that goes to war, those who come home kind of become the custodians of those memories.
Yes.
And the generation before mine was the Vietnam generation. And as I was heading into the Marine Corps, when I was that 17-year-old kid trying to figure out how to do a pull-up, I was reading, and I was reading, books like Jim Webb's Fields of Fire, which is about a Marine platoon in the Ashaw Valley. And those books meant a lot to me. And I read those books before I went to war. I came back from war, and I read them again, and they meant different things to me at both readings. So I had this sort of ambition. I'd like to try to write a book like that. And so as I left, I was sort of working a couple of jobs, and I was secretly on the side trying to write a sort of close to the bone, semi-autobiographical novel. But, writing as a career will throw you lots of curveballs too. So there's a story behind that book as well.
Tell it.
Okay. The story behind that book is, so I spent 2 years writing my sort of very close to the bone autobiographical novel, mostly about the war in Iraq and this platoon that I was mentioning and how they navigate the complexities of war.
Yeah.
And I, this is maybe for anyone listening who's considering a creative pathway in their lives. And I finished the book, and I had, in my political life, I met the guy who's no longer alive, but he was a great character named Dick Snyder. He at one point was the head of Simon & Schuster. And he said to me, I asked him, I said, Dick, I've written this novel. Would you mind taking a look at it? And he later told me, he's like, Elliot, the only reason I read your book was that you'd been in the war and I felt bad for you. And so he then read the book, and he called me after he read it, and he said, Elliot, I read your book. I got to tell you, I don't think it's a bleep. I'm going to help you.
Yeah.
And so
high compliment.
A very high compliment from him.
Yeah.
And he handed my book to a book agent who's still my book agent to this day. My book agent said, this is great. I'm going to send it to 26 publishers. Here's who I want to send it to. And in the back of my mind, I was like, wow, people say writing novels is hard. Like, this has really been pretty great and easy. And then he sends it out to 26 publishers. And I wait, and I wait, and I wait. And we get 26 rejections from this book. And so I was sitting there, and this is now a couple of years have passed since I've left the service. And I'm in this very daunting position where I've now concluded, I want to write. This is actually what I really want to do. And I've actually found something that I feel like I could do that would have as much meaning to me as what I was doing before, which was not certain. But I don't know if I'm going to be able to do it. Like, what if I completely fail at this? And, and that was a tough, just a tough time. It caused a lot of introspection. How am I going to make my life work again? And so basically, long story short, that first book, someone gave me the advice as I was writing a first book, and I decided I wanted to write. So, well, actually my father said, do you think you got a second book in you? And I kind of took that as a, son's challenge. And I said, yeah, I do. And I started working on a second book. So when this first one didn't work and didn't sell, I had another one, and we wound up, long story short, with some twists and turns, selling that second book, which is a book called Green on Blue.
Yes.
And that became my first book. And that gave me enough of a toehold to start building a career as a writer. But again, it gets to these ideas of, for anyone, if you're going to go do something, it's important to really do the reflection to understand why you're doing it, because you're going to hit these hard moments. And, if you're anchored in that, it helps you navigate those hard moments.
Yeah. So what happened to the first novel? Is it just like is it in the Elliot Ackerman archive?
It's in a drawer. I actually have this. Yeah, I have this dream. I haven't looked at it for a really, really long time.
You haven't read it in a long time.
In a long time, but that when I'm now old and gray, I'll pull it out of the drawer and I'll get into some decent shape, and maybe the first one will wind up being my last one. Yeah,
that's great. That's a great story. So, you weren't writing seriously before you came out of the military and drafted this first novel? Like, what did your literary life look like prior to that moment?
So I did not suspect, if you had sat down, 26-year-old Elliot Ackerman said you're going to wind up being a writer, I would have sort of laughed at you and rolled my eyes. So that was not on my radar. But in retrospect, I've always been a reader. I studied history and literature at school and international relations, and I've always written. So even when I was in the Marine Corps, I had this impetus to write. I used to write, now I look at them almost sort of semi-obnoxious articles to the Marine Corps Gazette, arguing about, writing articles about, why we should rethink about the physical fitness standard in the Marine Corps and how we do our tests. Or when I came back from Fallujah, I wrote a very long article all about the influence of World War I stormtrooper tactics on urban combat. And so when I look back now...
And were these published?
They're published in the Marine Corps Gazette. They're very deep cuts somewhere if you want to go look them up. But now I'm like, of course, I had this, I think, desire within me to process experience through writing and to make meaning of experience through writing. And I was doing that even before I knew that I was doing it in a very deliberate way.
Yeah. Do you have any writers who are kind of touchstones for you that have informed your sensibility?
Sure. I mean, and it comes and goes depending on what I'm thinking about and working on. But I've always loved Graham Greene and John le Carré. I love Joan Didion. I sort of all of the kind of classic American writers.
Yeah.
My wife, Lee Carpenter, is a truly great writer.
Yes.
I love her books.
Yes. Ilium, I've read Ilium.
Yes,
it's a
and
wonderful
I'm
novel.
not just saying that because I'm married to her, but she's amazing and really anchors me. So I have this constant churn. Guy de Maupassant is one of my favorites. I like the Frenchies. So I go all over the place with the writers who I admire, and I try to really read in an almost like a non-associative way. I really believe in sort of kismet and which books kind of wind up hitting me, and so I try to be very open to reading anything that comes.
Is there
my
anything
way.
you've read recently that you would recommend? I'm always looking for books.
What have I read recently? Let me come back to that one. Let me cycle through.
Yeah, take your time. And I'm curious about you were reading when you were serving in the Marines for 8 years.
I always sort of had a book going.
You always had a book going.
Yeah, fiction and nonfiction. I always read fiction, but I was encouraged by a mentor of mine in the Marines, sort of a big brother figure to read a lot of fiction. And I feel like that always stood me well because so much. And people will sometimes ask me like, Elliot, it's sort of odd, isn't it, that you were in this, you had this whole military career and that you went off and became a writer. Those seem almost like contradictory career paths.
Yes.
And to me, I'm like, no way, like they're actually very much complementary because I think, one of the things you do as a military officer or as an intelligence officer is you spend a lot of time thinking about your adversary and trying to get into their head or just to get into the head of the people who you're dealing with, the village elder you're having tea with twice a week for a year. What is he thinking about? So this idea of sort of trying to, and the Marines you're leading, why are these guys giving me a hard time? What's going on? What are the dynamics? So you spend a lot of time thinking about group dynamics. What motivates people. And that's a lot of the work of a fiction writer. If I could go back 1 second to the story I was telling you about Sergeant Bonatai before, you asked about books I was reading in the military. One of the reasons too, I had a little bit of a hard time with my first platoon is when I went through my infantry training, all of the infantry officers, we read a book by Stephen Pressfield called Gates of Fire, which is a famous fictional retelling of the Battle of Thermopylae. It's a fantastic book. I highly recommend it.
I have it. I have not read it.
Oh, it's great. And he also is a Marine. And is a wonderful man. So I thought that would be nice if our platoon also read a book. So I assigned them Robert Heinlein's Starship Troopers, which I don't know if you know this book, but
that's a brave move.
Yes, and we were going to read a chapter a week, and there was a mutiny in the platoon about it. Sir, if I wanted to sit around reading books, I would have gone to college, not joined the Marines. So I guess yes, I always sort of had that bend in me. I wanted them to read Starship Troopers because Starship Troopers is like a fantastic, it's great, it's exciting, but it's also this great meditation on the role of the soldier in society. What is the role of the citizen in society, and what should we have to do to earn our franchises as citizens?
Yes.
So I think fiction can be a great way to explore those types of themes.
Yeah, amazing. You mentioned a second ago how your work as an intelligence officer and commander forced you to think about other people's thinking and what motivates them, and there's a complementarity to your writing life and your military life. I'm wondering if, as you transitioned out of the military and started and decided to become a writer, were there habits that you developed in the Marines that you drew on as you became a writer and began to take that on as a professional identity?
Yeah, I'm 5,000%. It's so much as there are many ways to be a writer and to approach your work. I will say I approach my work kind of like a Marine.
Yes.
In that I'm very, very disciplined about it. I show up every day, whether it's a good day or a
Yeah.
bad day. When I write with a word count every day. I try to, if I'm working on a project, I'm write 1,000 words every day.
Really?
Whether they're good words or bad words, it doesn't matter. I have to hit them. And if I have a really busy day with other things, then I'm waking up at 4 a.m. to get my 1,000 words.
Yeah.
Other times I don't have to wake up at 4 a.m,
Yeah.
but I do it. Come like rain or shine, I do it.
So you wrote this morning?
Actually, I didn't, because I'm in a different process in a book. But I worked on something this morning.
You worked on something.
I'm editing something.
You're
and I
editing
edited
something.
the requisite
So,
amount of pages that I had said.
Yeah.
Okay, this many pages will be edited.
Yeah.
And I woke up and did that. That works for me.
Yes.
And it's the same way I got myself from doing 0 pull-ups to
Yes.
being fit enough to
Yeah.
be in special operations. That doesn't mean it has to work for everybody.
Yeah.
So again, my wife, who is a fantastic novelist, she works very differently.
Yeah.
And I'll know she's working on something, and she'll be living her life, moving around, having her days, not looking like she's actually writing. And then I'll suddenly say to her, like, "Oh, how was your day?" And she's like, "I had a great day on this project. I've been thinking about for like 10,000 words today." And I'm like, "How did you do?" She's worked it all out in her mind. And then it's almost like this process of transcription.
Yeah.
So there's many different ways
Yeah.
to do it. But for me, one of the things I took from the military is just sort of the ability to just like grind on something.
Yes.
And I think,
Yes.
sometimes there's this sense that writing or any type of art
Yes.
form is just this sort of like, oh, you walk in and this
yeah.
whimsy and inspiration hits
Yeah.
you, and then something is created. It's like, no, it is
Yeah. You have to
ugly.
work your way to
I mean,
inspiration.
it's, when I leave in the morning, I say, off to make the donuts,
Yeah.
down into the salt pits,
Yeah.
because that's, that the cumulative work is what finally
Yes.
allows you to have those moments of inspiration. Because there's many
Yes.
times where I'm sitting there and the day is not going well, and I'm
Yes.
on word 600 and nothing is happening, and then boom, and a whole bunch of things connect at once, and I'm like, wow, oh, so cool, and then I'm excited. But you have to show up and be at the desk for those moments.
Where do you work? Where do you write?
I'll work. It depends. On a good day,
Yeah.
I'm in a European cafe with a great meal in front of me, and the accordions are playing in the background. I'm on a good day. That's what I'd like
Yeah.
to say. But on other days, it's back of a plane, a train, sometimes at my desk.
Yes.
I do like cafes if I can get there, but
Yeah.
I'll get it done
Yeah.
wherever I have to get it done.
Pen and paper or computer?
Mostly computer. If I'm starting something brand new or outlining something, I'll do it by hand, but
Yes.
only probably the broad outlines of a book, and maybe the first 3 or 4 pages, and just to get me going. And then usually I'm on a laptop.
Yeah. And do you have more than one project going at the same time usually, or are you?
Usually I'll have one going, but I sometimes have to stop and start on a project. So
Yes.
like if I finish a draft of a novel, I might stop it, put it to the side, let it. Joan Didion used to say she used to take her manuscripts, and she actually used to physically do this. She would put them in the freezer. Like she would put
In the
book
freezer?
in the freezer, and let it sit there for a while.
Yeah.
And so I sort of she would physically do it. I will metaphorically do it. I think there's important to stop on something, work on something else for a few months, come back to it with fresh eyes. So
You said earlier that you were working on something else. What are you working on? I'm curious.
I had a book called Sheepdogs that came
Yes.
out, which was like a fun heist novel, and it's part of a series. So I'm editing the second book in this series right
Great.
now, which has been a lot of fun.
Great. So you have a new book coming out. Is it out now? 2084?
2084, yes.
It is out.
Yeah, just last week.
Yeah, it's got a great, appropriately green
Yes.
cover, which
Thank you.
I approve of. So that's the third book.
Mm-hmm.
Is it fair to call it a trilogy?
Yes, it is. Trilogy. It's
A trilogy that you wrote with Admiral Stavridis.
Yes.
So tell us a little bit about the trilogy.
So these books, Jim Stavridis, my co-writer, he was a career military officer, finished his career as the commander of Southern Command, and
What is the Southern Command?
so it's all of Latin America.
all
So he
of
was
Latin
a four-star
America,
admiral,
yeah.
and then was the Supreme Allied Commander, which is you're in command of all forces in Europe. So
Yeah.
it's like Eisenhower was the Supreme Allied Commander.
Yes.
And then
It's a
he
big
was
job.
a big job. And so he was the dean of the Fletcher School, where I was a graduate, although we didn't overlap. So when he retired, he became dean of the Fletcher School, and I was an alum. And so we sort of knew each other that way. And the inception of these books was he had an idea for the first book in the trilogy, which was 2034. And that was basically, he came to our editor and said, I'd like to, I have an idea to write a novel of, that would imagine what it would look like if the U.S. and China went to war in 2034. Think sort of like a fictionalized version of the Barbara Tuchman book, The Guns of August.
Yes.
Like, what would that escalatory chain look like? And he had written a bunch of nonfiction, had never written fiction before. And our shared book editor said, have you ever thought about like pairing up with a novelist? And I work with this guy named Elliot Ackerman. He's like, well, I know Elliot. And so that was sort of how the match was made.
Oh, wow. It was an arranged marriage.
So it was completely an arranged marriage. And so the project was presented to me, and I said, listen, I love Jim. Just because you're friends with someone doesn't mean you should, write a novel with them.
Yes.
And frankly, I left the Marine Corps with the vaulted rank of, captain. So I wasn't that senior, and he was the Supreme Allied Commander. And I frankly, I don't want to be arguing about adverbs or sentence structures with the Supreme Allied Commander. How's this going to work? And so I said, listen, let's write a chapter together and see how it goes. And that first chapter, the first chapter, 2834, and we had a great time writing that chapter, and have since written the books. So 3 of them together, and have had a fantastic collaboration. But the first book, 2034, deals with a war between 2 peer-level adversaries. The second book, 2054, deals with artificial intelligence and a crisis around sort of our democratic governance in the United States in that aforementioned year. And the last book, 2084, deals with climate, changing geography, and the future of war. And then through all 3 books, I mean, they're fundamentally, they're character-based books.
Yes.
Like they're not big door stoppers that are filled with a bunch of technical jargon. They are about a cast of characters that spawn all 3 books. And so, the children of the main characters in 2034 appear in 2084. So it's sort of a multi-generational saga. But our vision was to tell 3 stories that address what we felt were the 3 great challenges facing humanity in the 21st century, mainly peer-level war, artificial intelligence in our democracy, and then the effects of climate change.
Yeah, interesting. I think I'm looking forward to reading 2084 as soon as the school year's over. But I think I read in the blurb that it imagines a United States that's gone through a number of civil wars.
It imagines, so in 2084, the United States as we think of it, certain portions have been hived off. So you have the Free Republic of Florida, which is now, first of all, the southern third of Florida has been completely washed away due to flooding and superstorms. And you have the Free Republic of Florida. You have Washington, BC, Washington State, sort of British Columbia are their own thing. California has been hived off. And the United States and China are actually aligned as allies in something called the Consortium, which is an economic consortium.
Wow.
And they are facing another alliance, which are sort of the equatorial nations. So think Nigeria, Indonesia, Brazil, who have been ravaged by climate change. And these equatorial nations are what are called the reparationists, because they are demanding climate reparations and have the military wherewithal to do so. So the real underlying conflict is between the consortium and the reparationists. And so we sort of imagine that. And so, we talk there's a conversation that goes on always about sort of the environment, and sometimes it can feel sort of soft. And, what does this mean? Environmental, national security. What means geography? We're talking a lot about Greenland. Why are we talking about Greenland suddenly? Well, because the geography in Greenland is fundamentally changing. I mean, you can now access these northern waterways.
Yes.
So we have to talk about it. So if you project that forward, how does environment change geography? And as we've seen in a place like the Strait of Hormuz, geography really matters. Geography is the destiny of nations. So we play with a lot of those themes in the book. Yeah.
Amazing. Can't wait to read it. I wanted to go back to your writing with Admiral Stavridis. How do you actually do that? Like, how do 2 people write a book? Does one person draft and the other person reads it and revises?
So when we did
meet?
Sure, that's a great question. When we wrote the first draft, basically, we've done each book chapter by chapter, and so we'll sit down. We outline, this is what's going to happen in the chapters. Here we think are some of the main characters in the book. We do all that work, sort of like the equivalent of like a story meeting.
Yes.
And then once we get to the point where we really feel like, we understand the major muscle movements here. I mean, someone will go and draft out like the chapter, like do the first, lay the first, draft down. And that's always me. I'll do that. And then inevitably, it'll be I'll write that chapter, but I'll hit a point that's like, insert very sophisticated naval language here. And he'll do that. And
so you're in control of the voice. Is that fair?
Yeah,
to say?
usually I sort of take first crack on it. Like so much of writing a novel is like the interiority and the imagery that you're pulling. And so usually I'm the one who will take first crack. But we then will bat a draft back and forth until we both until we both feel good about it, and then we'll move to the next. And so we do that.
So do you know where the plot is going, or are you literally moving from chapter to chapter? So you don't know where the ending is 6 chapters forward.
Listen, there are many ways to do this. I don't, and we've written these books the way that I sort of write books, which is I will know generally what the book is about.
Yes.
I will have an opening in mind, and then I will move forward with the faith that on this journey of telling the story, everything will fall into place, and I'll see each incremental step. And I can't do that until I begin the journey.
Yes.
So like in 2034, for instance, and it's just like a plot point. Our initial concept was we're going to imagine this war. How does the war start? Like, well, there's going to be sort of like a Gulf of Tonkin incident in the South China Sea. Okay, well, what would that look like? And we start saying, okay, it would be this, and this would happen. Okay, well, who are our main characters? Okay, this will happen. These are the characters. Sarah Hunt, she's the commander. Okay, then we're going to have this Marine pilot. And we start putting those pieces into place. And then they're just sort of natural, logical next steps. So, for instance, in 2034, without spoiling it, we get about 2 chapters in, and there's been this big military naval setback to the United States, and now China's on, and then the question becomes like, what about nuclear weapons? Like, those are obviously going to come on the table. Well, geez, I guess we have to contend with that. Or there'll be little things that come up, and this is why I love writing. Like, I think there was a moment early in 2034 where Jim and I were working through a part of it. He's like, we really need to bring India into this. And I was like, okay. Well, we got a lot of we got a lot of characters. We can't have like 1 million characters here. No one's going to follow this book. Like, like, what if we make that cool character we're drawing who works at the National Security Council? What if we make him Indian American? Like, oh, that will get him to India. Cool. Okay. And that character became Sandy Chowdhury, who's one of like the key characters in all of the books. You don't know that when you're just starting, and it's almost like I've always thought, I can't plot that. I have to just start, and then I'm like, that's great. And those moments for me are like the most. It's the moments I love. That's why I love doing what I do, because it's really exciting to me to figure something like that.
And how did the two of you think about projecting forward technological advances? Like, how did you think about imagining what warfare is going to look like in 50 years technologically?
I think we have done our best to look at current trends and then project them forward to their logical conclusion, not only in terms of military hardware, but in terms of all of the technology, and do it in a way that serves the story. In the feel of the book. So for instance, like a book like 2034, one of the early conversations we had in 2034 was actually, should there be in 2034, should every car on the street be an autonomous vehicle? We're like trying to figure out, like, I'm
embarrassed to say I can't remember if they were they?
No, they weren't.
They weren't.
Like, we had a scene where there was a taxi pulls up, like a red cab that you have in DC pulls up to the White House. And we debated whether or not that should be one of those old cabs or it should be a new cab. Because how do we want the book, to feel? And we landed on the idea that no, it should be that we want 2034 to feel uncanny. And this idea of when something is uncanny, it's scarier to you. Like that if you had a robot maid that would help you around the house, if it looked like R2-D2, that would be sweet and cute. If it looked sort of like a normal human being with shark eyes, that would make you very uncomfortable. We want 2034 to feel like that uncanny shark-eyed version of the future that is frightening and gets your attention. So it's not only projecting forward in terms of, okay, this is what we think is going to happen, but also, what serves the story and trying to marry the two together.
Yeah. Do you have any aspirations to take it into the 22nd century?
Not yet. Not
the
yet.
Series?
I think it might be fun to write true science fiction. And I think in 2084, we're definitely pushing into science fiction, and in 2054. And I think, one of the things I love about writing was, when we were working on 2054 and writing about AI and writing about the integration of biology and technology, this idea that molecules will be the new microchips as we wind up sort of with this nanotechnology. Those were ideas we were wrestling with, and I feel like it's been gratifying to see a lot of those conversations moving much more into the mainstream. As you have sort of the technological elite in Silicon Valley talking about transhumanism. Like transhumanism is a big theme in 2054.
Yeah.
And when we were writing, it seemed much more fanciful than it seems today, a few years later.
Yeah. The last question I wanted to ask you before I maybe ask you for some book recommendations is, I know you're a senior fellow at the Jackson School of Global Affairs at Yale, and you've been teaching there for 3 years. What's your teaching been like there?
It's been great. And we have fantastic students there. I co-teach with a guy named Matt Trevahick, who is a dear friend of mine. He's also one of the world's most interesting human beings. He's had a pretty incredible life. He's spent time in Iraq and Afghanistan. He's spent time in Iran. He's a tech entrepreneur, speaks fluent Farsi, even though he is a 6'3", blonde-haired, blue-eyed rower from Boston. He spent time he was studying at the University of Tehran and was arrested at one point. He spent time in an Iranian prison. I mean, he's had a very interesting life, and so it's great to be able to engage with him in conversation and with our students. And I think one of the things we really like is our class there is a practitioner's class. So we bring in speakers from all over the field of really just international affairs. Military speakers like Jim Savridis comes and speaks, or Sebastian Junger has come to speak to our class each semester. People from the worlds of private intelligence come to speak, to really give the students a sense of, okay, if you want to go out into the world and do what is interesting in the broader field of international affairs, here are all the different ways you can do it, and be a doer as opposed to someone who's only rooted in theory. And I think sometimes for students it's tough to know how to take theory and put it into practice.
Yes.
And our class really tries to show how you would do that.
Yeah. Have you noticed any difference in your students' use of technology over the 3 years that they've been there? Or is it because of the nature of your class, is artificial intelligence not a factor in
I think the nature of our class,
teach?
because it's such a human focused soft skills class that it is not.
It doesn't lend itself.
It doesn't really lend itself to. I mean, listen, if you want to, one of the first essay assignments we give the students, actually the first one we give them, we say, listen, there's an old trope in foreign affairs when you show up in a war zone that it's the 3 M's. There's the 3. Everyone who's here is basically one of 3 types of M's: a mercenary, a misfit, or a missionary. Which one are you? And we ask the students to write that.
Yeah.
So if you want to get AI to write that essay for you, like, fine, but why are you even in our class?
Why are you here?
Why are you here? So we asked them to sort of also do that type of reflection to kind of get to the point we were talking about earlier. Like, okay, if you're going to go do this type of work, it's really important that you know why you want to do it.
Yeah.
Because you'll be tested.
Yeah. Any books you want to recommend?
I was thinking that with no great particular order, because we're talking about AI.
Yeah.
I've been reading this book, which is excellent, called The Infinity Machine, which is about, I always butcher his name, Hassan Demirtaş, who was the founder of Google's DeepMind, and captained the team for AI's AlphaGo. So it's that story. I don't know if you're familiar with the story, but they're basically the team that figured out how to beat the world's greatest Go player as a way to show
which they do, right?
Which they did. And they did in 2016. And it's a remarkable story. I mean, it tracks his entire evolution as sort of the leader. But that story, when they beat Lee Sedol, the greatest Go player in the world, in 2016. So there was a recent news story about Anthropic's release of Mythos, which is their new, very powerful AI. Mythos as an AI is 1 million times more powerful than the AI that beat Lee Sedol at Go. So that sure shows the trajectory of where we're headed. But it's a brilliant book. I mean, it's really interesting. Sometimes this subject matter can get really technical and feel sort of impenetrable. I would really recommend that book. I'd recommend a book called The Maniac, which is a novel that is also about AI. Just check it out. And I recently gave one of my kids True Grit to read, and they loved it.
Good.
And I revisited it.
Yeah.
And that's just a great
Never
novel.
read it.
So you should, check it out. It's a good one. And that's just one I think my son is has found a real deep love of kind of the Clint Eastwood spaghetti westerns. So we've been
Yes.
watching a lot of
Yeah,
old
yeah.
Clint
Yeah.
Eastwood, and
Those
that
are
kind
great.
of led to some, obviously, he
They're
was
long
being
and
true
not
to-
a lot of dialogue.
That's right. But they look great. So,
Yeah.
so that sort of led us to reading a little True Grit to stay
Yeah.
in that kind of that genre. So
Great.
that's sort of what's been floating around my bedside
Yeah.
table.
Great suggestions. Elliot, thank you so much
Yeah,
for
thank you,
talking.
John.
That
This
was
was
fun.
fun. Yeah, that was
Appreciate
fun.
it. Thank
Yeah.
you.